recommended you to me. He said maybe you should try this guy out, and then I did check out your name, and I did think I saw your story a while back, and I thought, yeah, I'd like to hear, if you would be interested in telling me about your story. I did notice that you do have a lot of videos out there that other people have interviewed you with. And
yeah, I've been invited to be on different people's podcasts, and it's just been a pleasure for me because I love to share my story, and every time I tell it, I always feel like there's somebody out there who needs to hear it and is given the encouragement and the hope that knowing that there is so much more than what we realize.
Yeah, well, that's I've had a little bit of an experience with the afterlife, not near death. I never had a near death experience, but I was hit by a car when I was 10 years old and basically died, but not quite. So I was told by one of the other near death experiencers that I've interviewed. He said you may have had a near death experience, but couldn't remember it, which kind of brought me to you because you said you had 100% memory of yours.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear maybe there's something subconscious I'm not able to remember. But so I have an awful fascination with it for some reason. So maybe there is something there. I don't know. But I'd like to hear. You said that you had some anesthesia, I believe, that was your allergic reaction to that, and that caused you to.
That's exactly what happened. I was going in for a. Well, actually, do you want me to start? I'll tell you from the beginning if you're ready.
Love to, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you. Well, this is how it started. It was back in 1987. And I was only 21, and my dad was in sales his whole career, and he won this sales contest, and part of what he won were these mopeds, and they're kind of like what we would call scooters today, and we used to ride them all over the neighborhood all the time. Well, one afternoon I got in an accident and I slammed into a tree, and the way that I landed, I tore the tendons off my right hand, and I had to go in to have surgery to have them reattached. Well, I had never had surgery before. I don't think I even spent much time in a hospital, so I didn't know what to expect. So we go in. My mom drives me down. We go into the operating room, and when they started to give me the anesthesia, I had some kind of an allergic reaction, and it stopped my heart, and I died. And it was during that period that I had this whole experience that we now call a near-death experience. And one thing I want to tell your listeners is a lot of people, when they think about a near-death experience, they think of what they call a traditional kind of near-death experience, where the person is involved in either surgery or there's some kind of an accident, and they find themselves floating above their body, looking down at the scene. And then they become aware of this tunnel. And at the end of the tunnel, there's a white light. So as they're moving down this tunnel, they're met by somebody. Usually it's a loved one, a family member, a friend, someone who tells them that it's not their time, they have to go back. Well, my story, it's different because when mine started, I didn't see the tunnel. I didn't see the white light because they put me on the other end of the white light. And I think of all of these NDE experiences as parts of a jigsaw puzzle. And I think the part of my jigsaw puzzle that he finally had been able to answer is what happens when somebody goes into the white light at the end of that tunnel. And I'll begin from there just to kind of give your audience kind of a play-by-play about what happened. So when they gave me the anesthesia and my heart stopped, the very next second, it was kind of like that fast. I was standing in the most beautiful building I had ever seen. It looked like beautiful white polished marble everywhere I looked. And it was this huge, long building. It was so long that I could not see the end of it. And to the right of me were these white, tall, marble Greek-looking columns. They must have been 20 or 30 feet high, and they went all the way down this corridor, about maybe 6 feet apart. In the middle of this building were these tables, and these tables corresponded to the columns. They were right next to them. And the tables went all the way down. And there were two people sitting at every one of these tables. Well, Cory, right about now, in my left ear, I heard, "My name is Alan. I'm your spirit guide." And what happens is my spirit guide, we all have spirit guides. And I had never known this before. I never knew anything about any of this when I was 21. Well, we all have spirit guides, and they help us plan each one of our lifetimes in terms of what we want to learn, what we want to experience, and they're with us for our whole lifetime. So my guide took me on this journey to the other side, and he showed me these different places. And he was telling me every place he took me to, he was talking to me in my left ear, telling me what I was seeing. And what's so remarkable to me is people have asked me for years, did I come back with any kind of an ability? And I tell them no. The only thing I remember is that the only thing that I had was a complete 100% recall of every single thing that happened. So I'm able to remember everything my guide told me and everything he showed me, even though it's been all these years later. To me, it's like it just happened yesterday. So that's how I'm able to describe everything that I saw, because my guide is telling me this. And so we're in this beautiful white marble building, the columns on the right, all these tables in the front. And the most interesting part was on to the left of me where I was standing were these tunnels. They looked like tunnels that had been cut out of solid marble, a perfect 90-degree angle, and they went down as far as you could see. And my guide told me that the building that I was standing in is called the Orientation Center. And where I was is where people come into when they finish a lifetime on Earth and they go into the white light. At the end of that white light is the Orientation Center, exactly where I was standing. Well, my guide told me to look up, and I looked at the next tunnel, and there was a man coming through. He was an elderly gentleman. He was probably in his 80s or 90s. He had lived a long life here on Earth, and he had his right hand holding his chest like he had heart pain. And my guide told me that he just passed from having a heart attack. Well, in the middle of this corridor where these tables, at every one of these tables, there were these two people sitting there. And my guide told me that they're called orientation counselors. And their job is to help people when they come back from an Earth life back to the other side. So this woman that was closest to him, she stood up. She walked over to him. She took his hands in hers, and she walked him back to the table, and they sat down. And she started talking to him. Well, my guide was telling me that what they do is they help people remember where they're from. Because most of us, when we come into a lifetime, we forget where we're from and we forget who we really are. And most of us don't have a memory of where we're from. There are some people that I have met, and you may have met some people too in your life, that some people do kind of have a little bit of a memory of where we're from. But for the most part, most of us don't remember. So these orientation counselors are there to help us remember where we're from. So I was watching her talk to him, but I was too far away to hear what she was saying. But I could see she was talking to him. And my guide said to watch him. So I started watching him, and all of a sudden, he started to change. He changed from a man who was in his 80s or 90s into a much younger gentleman in his early 30s. And my guide said, everybody on the other side is in their 30s. They call it the other side. A lot of us call it heaven or the afterlife, but they tend to call it the other side. And I never knew during my experience that I had died, because I think I would have asked so many more questions. And one of those questions would have been, why are we in our 30s? Is it because that's when Jesus died, or what's the reason for it? So I don't know why, other than the fact that that's how God created us. We're all young in our 30s on the other side. So after she was done talking to him, he stood up and he walked off and he walked between these columns. He walked down 3 steps into what I call the gardens. And I don't know if that's what they call them. It's just that's what it looked like to me. There were these absolutely perfectly manicured, gorgeous gardens. The grass that was out there was the greenest grass I had ever seen. There were flowers and plants and trees. It was like looking at the most perfect English garden you've ever seen. And there were all these people there. And my guide told me that once you have your orientation in this building, you go to have what's called a reunion. And what that means is all the people that you knew in your lifetime who crossed before you are there waiting for you at the end of your lifetime. And there must have been hundreds of people that were there to greet this man. They were not just people that he knew in his life, but all the people that he already knew on the other side before he came in. So there are all these people there, and what my guide was telling me was that the reason the reunion is such a big deal is because so many souls don't want to come to Earth. And the reason is because it's so hard here. So when any of us come into a lifetime on this planet, it's such a big deal that we decided to come in and have a lifetime here. So when we finish our lives and we go back to the other side or go back home again, everybody is there to greet us. And everybody was applauding. They were hugging this man. It was like a big, huge party. And that's what happens to all of us. We all have these reunions when we get back to the other side. And from there, then that's when my near-death experience really started going quickly. Do you have any questions at this point for me, Cory?
I probably have a lot, but the only one that kind of triggered my mind was when you said people that went before us would be waiting for us. So,
Yeah.
Those people like that are waiting for us. Have they like? I know you said some of them didn't come to Earth, but have some of them actually come to Earth and just passed on before us that are going to be greeting us?
Oh yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All
Sorry.
Like your family, people that you knew in your lifetime, if you had parents that passed or grandparents or other family members, friends, they're all going to be there to greet you when you get there.
That's very encouraging. I had my father passed away in 2005, and my best friend throughout my whole childhood and in my young adult life, he passed away at 24, almost 25. Oh. So I'm looking forward to seeing those guys again. So that'll be great.
You will see them again.
And I had a dog. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. Last year was a weird year for me in 2023. I lost my uncle, who I absolutely just loved. I knew him my whole life. And my dad passed in December and my mom passed in October. So last year I had all these people who passed. And I always wondered, how was I going to handle that when I had immediate family members pass? You know what? I actually did really well because I knew and I know where they went. And it's not just that I have this belief about people who survive death, that they're all on the other side. It's a knowing now for me. I know where they went. And I know that when all of us finish our lifetimes, we're all going to get to see our families again. They're all going to be there waiting for us.
Well, that's encouraging.
And I think that's probably one of the most important messages that I got from my NDE was that none of us really die. We just go to a different place. So that was called the reunion. Mm-hmm. And what happened, Cory, is that my guide took me to a place on the other side that I still don't know what it's called. I just know that it was kind of similar to being on a college campus. You know how college campuses will have like their history building over here. They're going to have their English building here. You've got your science building. All these buildings are on the one campus. That's kind of what it felt like. Like he was taking me to this place where there was a tremendous amount of learning. There were so many people everywhere, and there were these different buildings, and a lot of them had the same architecture as Greece or Rome had in antiquity. The beautiful white marble columns and white marble. It was absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. And I don't even have the words to describe how beautiful these buildings were. They were just gorgeous. In fact, what I like to tell people is if they want to get an idea of what some of these buildings looked like, there's a temple in the country of Turkey, and it's called the Temple of Artemis, Artemis, and it looks like a Greek building, and it looks very much to the same building that I saw that we call the Orientation Center. So if they want to go look at Google, they can go do a Google search under the Temple of Artemis and see kind of what I saw.
Yeah.
Well, the next building he took me to was this huge rectangular building. Again, it had white marble columns all around the perimeter of it. And he took me to the inside, and it was a round room. This building was full of rooms everywhere, but he took me to a round room, and it looked like a movie theater, but it was round. And on top were these movie screens. There must have been, maybe 12, 15 of these movie screens all along a circle above my head. And all of a sudden, they turned on. And my guide said, this is what we call a life review. And on each one of these screens, there was a different part of my lifetime that was playing. It was like watching a movie. One screen had me as a little child. Another screen had me on my first day of kindergarten. Another screen had me as an adolescent, and every screen had a different age that I had lived up to that lifetime, or up until that age of 21. And my guide said, everybody goes through a life review. And the reason we do that is to see if we accomplish the things that we set out to accomplish before we came in. And there's also something that's really unique about the life review. Every one of us has to go through it when we get back. And what it does is it teaches you two things. The first thing I learned was that it shows you the things that you did in life that you never even thought were important. And I'll give you an example. One of the screens that was playing was me as an elementary school kid on the playground at recess. And there was a kid that we knew, his name was Troy. And he had something like muscular dystrophy or some kind of illness where he wasn't able to walk without crutches. One day he was out walking and he fell. And we went over, we helped pick him up, handed him back his crutches, and I thought nothing about that. Well, they were showing me that in one of these video screens, and I could feel how much Troy appreciated the fact that we stopped and helped pick him up. And it was something that I never thought anything about. But to the other side and to God, that means that's a tremendous thing that you did, is they look at all the things that you did that made a difference for other people. And you can feel that as you watch the life review. You can feel how your actions affected somebody else. The other caveat to that is you also feel the things that you may have done that hurt other people. If you intentionally or maliciously hurt people, you also feel what they feel also. So if in your lifetime you never had compassion for people, you never had love for people or care for people, you learn how your actions affected other people. And people always ask me, what about someone like Hitler? What happens to them? The same thing, they have to go through a life review also. And the part of the life review is that it's designed as a learning tool, and it helps people. If you hurt other people, you'll actually feel what you did and how that person felt. And that in turn teaches that soul. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I've heard that said in some of your other videos. I struggle with it a bit, but I am not saying I disagree. I just I wonder if you don't mind me asking you a question about somebody who goes through their life review, and let's say a guy like Hitler, would they be separated from God at that point, or condemned to come back to live another life to try to get it right the next time, or like do they go to hell? I don't know if you believe in that, but I don't know if you have a take on that, or
Yeah, I can tell you what I know, Cory.
okay.
I don't know if I told you or if you saw my videos on some of the history before I had my NDE. But I was raised Catholic. My dad was very Catholic. We used to go to church 2 or 3 times a week, and then also on Sunday. So I was raised believing very much in a judgment and in a hell. I literally believed that. Well, during my NDE, when I was on the other side, something extraordinary happens when you're there, and you can feel God on the other side. You can feel how much this being that we call God loves and cherishes every single one of us. And I learned just from this experience that God never created a hell. There is no literal hell where he sends souls to be punished for eternity, because there is no judgment. There is no judgment day. What happens is when you have that life review, that's kind of a self-judgment. It's we all look at how we did and how we achieved our lives, and did we succeed in terms of what we wanted to accomplish. But there is no judgment. The only person that judges your life is you. What I don't know, though, is, take, for example, like we just talked about Hitler, for example. Does he have to come back into another lifetime? That I don't know. I do know that all of us, nobody forces us to come into a lifetime. It's totally up to that individual soul. But in a case like Hitler, for example, I don't know if the life review is enough to teach him, to teach that soul that it's not acceptable to hurt other people. It's just, it's like that's not something that is tolerated. And God knows everything. Nothing is hidden from God. And the life review shows people, it shows everything about your whole life. Everything that you did in your lifetime is on that life review. And if a person doesn't learn, I'm sure that they're given the option to come back into another lifetime and do it over and do it right. But I don't know for sure how that process happens.
I
That's a
mean, that
great
makes
question.
sense. Yeah, it makes sense. I just I interviewed a lot of different near-death experience people. Some have said that they've had actual hell experiences where they went into hell. I've been raised Catholic myself. I went to a Catholic school. Not that I'm Catholic anymore. Nothing against them, but I just they have their ways, and that's cool. But yeah. So the people that say that they actually went to a literal hell, would that be maybe them judging themselves and being put in a scenario like that? I don't know if you can answer that, but
Yeah, here's what I can tell you. This is something that I wish I had asked when I had my experience, because it's something that I've been asked so many times, and it's something I wonder about also. But apparently, and this is what I've heard from other people, my guide didn't show me this, so I don't have firsthand knowledge of this. I only know from what people have told me. But the other side is made up of levels. There are, or heaven, the other side, or the afterlife, is made up of different levels of spirituality. And from what I understand about the lower levels, they are levels that people who have chosen to kind of turn their backs on God. I don't know why anybody would do that, but there apparently are lower levels where these souls tend to congregate. And I think that's where people have experienced what they consider to be hellish types of experiences, where they saw hell. And I think they're in the lower levels, because when everybody, when they pass, when they finish their lifetimes and they physically die, they go back to the other side. All of us do. And it depends on your level of development, what level you want to be at. And apparently these lower levels are where the souls who are not very well developed, where they tend to congregate. And I don't know that for sure, but that's only what I've been told.
yeah, that makes sense. I've been told something similar to that myself.
Yeah.
So, I don't know either. That's why I'm kind of searching for the answers. I guess I'll get them when I get on the other side. But
You know what? I totally understand that, because I have more questions today than I did when I had my near-death experience. So many things go through my mind, so many questions about, especially about the idea of hell. Where did it come from? So just things like that I cannot wait till I get to go back home again, and I can learn those answers too, because I still have tons and tons of questions.
yeah, I imagine you would, especially given that type of experience.
Yeah.
So You said that you met Jesus in one of your videos I reviewed or
Yeah,
watched. Do you want to talk about maybe the character of Jesus Christ a little bit and how you interacted with him?
sure, sure. His my experience with him happened at the very end of my NDE. It was the last thing that I saw. And my guide took me to this field. And the other side is kind of like life on Earth, but only perfect. The other side doesn't have any war or starvation or homelessness or disease. None of that exists there. That only exists here on this planet. And he took me to this beautiful wildflower field. It was beautiful meadow with flowers and green grass. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then my guide left. And then there was Jesus. And I knew it was him. He didn't tell me who he was. I just
Mhm.
knew that it was him. He was standing right in front of me. And I could see his hands. He was wearing a white robe with a golden sash around his waist. And he was wearing gold colored sandals that laced up his calves. And when I went to look at him to try to see his face, there was so much light that was coming out of him that I couldn't see his features. All I could see was just the light that was around him. It was so bright, I couldn't
Mhm.
see his features at all. But he spoke to me and he said, "You must tell them there is no death." And the very second he said that, it was boom, I was right back in my body in that hospital room.
Really?
And the most extraordinary thing about that was you always, from how I was raised, you always get the sense that Jesus judges people, that there's going to be a judgment day. But what I felt from him was the most extraordinary type of unconditional love that I have ever experienced. There was
Mhm.
so much love coming from him and so much understanding that he knew how hard our lives were here on earth because he had also been here and he was murdered in his lifetime. And I also got the impression from him that he didn't care what religion we followed, as long as whatever religion we practiced brought us closer to God. So I didn't get the feeling that if you're not a Christian, you're not going to go to heaven. I absolutely didn't get that feeling. It was a feeling that he has tremendous compassion, tremendous love for everybody who's here on earth, but that it doesn't matter what religion you follow. As long as you love God, you try to help people, you try to make a difference with your life, it doesn't matter which religion you follow because it's totally immaterial. God doesn't care. God just wants you to have a relationship with him, to believe in him. But it doesn't matter what religion you follow. That's the one important thing I got from seeing Jesus in that field.
Well, that makes sense, and that's very encouraging for people like myself. I don't follow religion as much as having my belief in God, just because I've had a little bit of an experience with the presence of God, and it made me realize that, yeah, you don't got to be so dogmatic on different things that you've been taught. You said you were Catholic, so you kind of understand what I mean. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I guess the another question, speaking about Jesus, is if there's no judgment, what was the purpose of his crucifixion? I don't want to sound attacking there. I'm just trying to get an answer on that
Yeah.
myself.
I I I don't know if the other side or if heaven had any kind of say in why he was crucified. Because I know with Christianity, the idea is that Jesus was crucified for the forgiveness of sins.
Hmm.
But I don't necessarily believe that. I look at after my NDE, I think of myself as 50% Christian because I believe in Jesus. I believe in how he lived his life. I believe in what he came to teach, to love each other, to be compassionate, to encourage each other, and especially not to judge. All the way through the New Testament, you hear about Jesus saying, "Do not judge." Like
Hmm.
Matthew 7 says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." So I don't know if Jesus was, my personal belief is that he was murdered. I don't think there was any direct tie to forgiveness of sins. I think that it was a time in history where if you talked about Rome or started any kind of a idea like an insurrection, you were crucified. I think he was just simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he was caught. I don't know if his life had anything to do with forgiveness of sins. I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I know that I read about, in the different gospels that in the Garden of Gethsemane, he kind of saw it coming. But
Yeah.
I've also with the Bible, yourself. I don't take it like as a fundamentalist would. I don't take it like the verbatim word of God, but I do get a lot of encouragement out of it, and it does give me a history lesson, so to speak. So
Yeah.
I think it's great for that. But yeah, I struggle with questions like that myself because I believe what you just said about maybe he didn't die for the sins of the world. I don't want to say that because I'm not sure. But at the same time, I believe that he did give us a blueprint on how to live our lives according to the Creator God wants us to. So I think that's a great answer.
That's exactly how I think of it too. I believe that he came to Earth to teach us what really matters, what is really significant, how to live your life in such a way that you help people. That's why we're here. I think we're really here for two reasons. The first one, we come in to learn, to experience, and to grow. And the second reason we come here is to help others. There's a great line, a great quote that I absolutely love from the Dalai Lama. And he said, our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. And I've tried to live my life that way, trying to share my story as much as I can because I know that it gave me so much hope. And I know that it gives others that kind of hope also. So that's why I was just thrilled to come on your podcast and share my story.
Well, it's great having you. I mean, like I said, I did watch a lot of your videos, and you say a lot of the stuff that other people don't say, which I do like because it kind of gives maybe a more encouraging look at the afterlife as opposed to some people that I've spoke to said do this, do this, do this, or you go to hell, which
Yeah,
it's kind of scary for the person that's struggling. They don't need to hear that, I don't think. Yeah.
exactly. I
So
totally believe you. Do we still have time, or does this kind of time out?
no, it's Skype, so it's pretty much unlimited, I think, on this.
Okay.
I used to use Zoom because the one gentleman I interview quite often, his name's Howard Storm. Don't know if you've ever heard of him or
Oh
not.
yeah, I know. I've heard of him. I've read his book.
Yeah, he just we do a weekly thing, or we used to. He has a little health issues going on right now, so we're kind of backing off a bit. But we use Zoom because that's all he knew how to use, and I was only
Yeah.
able to get 40 minutes at a time on that, and I never use it outside of that. That's why I never upgraded it. But so Skype is the way I like to go. But yeah, he's taught me a lot. He had a near death experience. You said you read his book. I'm
Yep.
assuming the My Descent into Death one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got quite a story, eh?
Yeah.
And
My wife and I both read his story. And in fact, my wife used to contact him by email, and he was
yeah,
great. He would answer questions for us, and I loved his story also.
yeah,
His story is he became a minister after he had his near death experience.
he did, yep, and he gave up a lot, man. Like he's taught me a lot. He's changed my life to a certain point, and because of him, I'm not the guy I once was. Let's put it that way. Wasn't always a great guy, but I try to be better. I work at a homeless shelter now, and you say, trying to help other people. Sometimes it's hard to do that because with addiction and mental illness, it gets frustrating. But
Yeah.
that's my focus is to help them people, and also, I'm a contractor by trade too, so I feel a great sense of helping people when their home's falling apart, and you can go back in and fix it for them,
Yeah.
things like that. So it's great for me, and Howard's encouraged me a lot. People like yourself have encouraged me a lot. Other people I've read about, I do a lot of background checking on people. That's why I wanted to speak to you because I didn't feel like you had, you kind of said a lot of stuff that I felt was true. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it does. As
Yeah.
opposed to other people, they sometimes deviate from their story a little bit and they add things and subtract things, which I found yours is pretty consistent, like I did with Howard's.
Yeah.
So it's great to have you on, and I could ask you 1,000 questions every second, but I know you're only a man and you only get a certain amount of time, so I don't want to bombard you with questions. But
Well, I'll keep going then, and I'll share the rest of it if you want.
yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Excellent. So after we did the life review and I was able to see all these different screens, saw my life, and had a chance to understand that you can feel how your actions affected other people.
Mm-hmm.
Then he took me to, we left there and he took me to another building. It was another really gigantic, all the buildings that I saw, they were so large that we have nothing here on Earth to compare them to. Maybe the closest thing is the pyramids in terms of that size in Egypt, because these buildings were just enormous. And again, it had columns all along the outside, and we took me to the inside. And this one was inside of it. It looked like a movie theater, like a movie theater we would have today. And there was one screen up at the front of the room. And this was a hard part for me to understand because I was raised Catholic. And what this theater was, is my guide showed me 3 different lifetimes I had had, because he wanted me to tell people that past lifetimes really are real, because we have existed for eternity. When God created all of us, it must have been billions of years ago, because we have always been. And of course, we're going to have more than one lifetime. And I had a hard time with this because of how I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
But my guide said, I'm going to show you 3 different lifetimes. So I'm looking at this movie screen, and all of a sudden the screen comes on, and it's showing me as a monk. I had a shaved head, and I was wearing a red gown, and I was in a monastery. And what I was doing was, my life was to teach kids about the monastery, how to be a monk. And that life happened somewhere in Southeast Asia. Then it disappeared. Then another one showed up. And this was me as I was a shoe peddler. And I had a wheelbarrow, a wooden wheelbarrow. And I had a bunch of shoes that were stacked in this wheelbarrow. And my job in that lifetime was I fixed people's shoes in that village. And that life happened somewhere in Eastern Europe. And then it disappeared. Then another life showed up, and it was me. I was a fisherman, and I was standing in a wooden boat on this lake, and I had nets, and I was tossing these nets into the lake to try to catch fish for the village.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had such a hard time believing this because it was never talked about in Catholicism. There was never any talk about past lives. So I had heard that you can go see a hypnotherapist to see if you could see past lifetimes. So I did. I went to see a hypnotherapist, and sure enough, I saw 3 different lifetimes. And that's when I really believed that past lifetimes are real. So that was something that I always like to share with people, because a lot of people feel like they didn't get to accomplish everything they set out to accomplish. Well, the truth is that you can have as many lifetimes or as few as you want. And the reason that we come into a lifetime is to learn. And one of the reasons that so many people come into an earth life is because of how challenging it is. And from my life, from all the experiences that I've been through, is the things that are difficult. Because on the other side, in heaven, you still can learn, but it's not experiential learning, because there's no conflict on the other side. There's nothing that you have to test yourself with. That only happens when you come into a lifetime. So I just thought that was amazing to see that past lifetimes really are real.
Yeah, that's really cool. I spoke with other near death experiences or people that said we don't get reincarnation. I guess is what you're referring to. We don't get to do that. On rare occasions we do, but I never did believe that. I always thought, well, like you said, you may want to, you may not have learned something that you feel like you might want to come back and learn, etc. So it's great to hear that perspective of it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and you say that on the other side, there's no experiential learning. So you're in heaven, metaphorically speaking, and you just learn, or like do you already have the downloaded knowledge, or do you gotta acquire that somehow? Or I don't know if you can answer
No,
that.
learning, when you pass over, when you finish your lifetime, you go back and you're still you. Like you're still going to be Cory. You're still going to have all of your knowledge, all of your experiences. But when you get back to the other side, you have all of your memories back again. All of your memories from all of your lifetimes. You become the totality of everything God created you to be. But the most amazing thing is that when God created all of us, he created all of us with this desire to want to learn. And it's almost like it's part of our DNA that we all want to continue growing. No, I've never met anybody who didn't like to learn new things. And I think that comes from God. So on the other side, all of us still learn. We can we can go to lectures over there, we can go to classes, everything that you like to do here on earth, you can do on the other side. It's an absolute perfect world. But it's the only thing it's different is it's trying to like describe to somebody what it's like to ride a bike. And you can describe to somebody what it's like, but you never really know what it's like until you do it for yourself. And that's what it's like to come into a lifetime here, and that's why we come in, is to get that kind of experiential learning.
That makes sense. So
Yeah.
I watched another talk you had with a lady that you said some people don't come to this planet because it's it's a difficult planet. I hear.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do those people do? That do they just go to another planet, or do they just not come
Yep.
here, or do they?
They go elsewhere. They go to other planets. And I'll mention that in just a minute too, because this is my favorite part, is where I learned about other planets.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you the next part. So the next building he takes me to is another gigantic building, but this one was round. It was a round building, and it had a big dome on top, and it had the marble columns, but they were all in a huge circle. And my guide said that, and I don't know why this is, but whenever we plan a lifetime, this is the building that we go to plan a life. So he takes me to the inside and walks me up to a beautiful white marble table. And there was a scroll on this table. And what it looked like, have you ever seen those kind of, they look like Egyptian papyrus paper,
Mm-hmm.
kind of brown.
Yep.
That's what it looked like. And it was rolled up and it had a blue ribbon around it. So I walked up to this table and I took the ribbon off and I unfolded the scroll on the table. And immediately I could see that there was black writing. And what it looked like calligraphy. Remember the kind of writing that when you're a kid, you have that ink well, you have an ink pen, you dip it in the ink well, then you write out. That's kind of what the writing looked like. And my guide was explaining to me that everybody who comes into a life on Earth or to any planet, everybody plans out the major elements of their lifetime and they write them on these scrolls. And you plan things like, what country are you going to live in? Who your parents are going to be? What language are you going to learn? Are you going to have kids? Are you going to go to a university? What kind of career are you going to have? And all these things go into a life. And it almost felt like, when people at the end of every year, people have these New Year's resolutions and they write out goals that they have for the next year. That's kind of what it felt like, that everybody has these plans, that you have a reason. Nobody's life is an accident. Everybody comes in for a specific reason. And right about then, I looked over to my right, and there was this huge sprawling wall, and it was full of scrolls. And what it was everybody who was in a lifetime at that time had a scroll. So my guide took me to this building to show me that we really do plan our lifetimes. It's not just some random accident. And when he took me to this building, he took my scroll out and put it on this table so that I could tell people that we really do plan a lifetime. Well, as I was looking at the scroll, I went to try to read it. And as I tried to read it, it folded up again. And I wasn't able to see anything that I had written about my life. And I think the reason was because if I had known what I was supposed to learn, maybe I would somehow not experience what I came to experience.
Yeah.
So that was called, I want to, before I forget, I want to say one more thing. When I looked over to my left, there was this window, this gigantic window, and there was a walkway out in front of this window, and there were all kinds of people walking back and forth. And this was the first time that I actually saw other people, and they looked just like we do. So many people have asked me, well, what do we look like on the other side? How do we appear? And we look just like we do now. Everybody has their own personality. Some people are taller, some are shorter, some have brunette hair, some are blonde. It's totally up to how the person wants to appear. So wherever my guide took me, it was a really busy area, and there were so many people. It looked like, have you ever been to a big city at lunchtime and you see all these people walking back and forth everywhere? That's kind of what it looked like. Well, on the other side of this walkway, there was the most beautiful lake I think I have ever seen. It's nothing that I've ever seen here on Earth. And this is when my guide told me that everything that you like to do here on Earth, you can do on the other side. And it also includes all the most beautiful things you've ever seen, like nature. This lake, it was a round lake, and it was so still it looked like glass. And I could see the bottom of the lake. It was extremely clear. And all around the whole circumference of this lake were these trees, what they call weeping willow trees. I don't know if you've ever seen those.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, and they had all of their leaves floating on the top of the lake. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And my guide said the other side has all the beautiful nature that we have here. There are oceans and lakes and rivers and mountains, and you can go mountain bike riding, you can hike, you can go to the beach. Everything that you like to do here, you can also do there. And I thought that was one of the most encouraging things about the other side, is that there is so much hope that when we pass, you don't really die. You just go back to the other side where we're from. So that was one of my favorite parts of my near-death experience, was learning about the the different aspects of the other side that you can enjoy and visit, just like you do here.
That sounds awesome. There's lots of stuff I'd like to do here that I'd probably be doing over there if we're allowed to. So that's encouraging for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
Love reading.
the next
Sorry,
part of mine, this next part I think is my most favorite, because my guide took me to this building. It looked like a stadium. Like if you were going to go watch a football game or watch soccer, you would go to this huge, gigantic stadium. This one wasn't made of marble, though. This one looked like it was made out of steel. It was a stadium, just huge stadium. So he takes me to the inside, and there's thousands of seats inside this stadium. And what it was I was inside of a planetarium. Did you ever go to a planetarium when you were a kid?
Yep.
Yeah, so did I. We had field trips.
Mm-hmm.
And the planetarium is something that they can show you on the ceiling, planets and galaxies and stars. Well, that's where I was. And all the lights were on. This building was super bright, and I could see that there were just thousands of seats everywhere. And remember in the beginning when we talked about that orientation building had orientation counselors there?
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, people pursue the things that they love to do. And you have a job over there, but it's not like you have a job here on Earth where you have to go to a job to pay your bills. On the other side, you do the thing that you love to do. Well, there was a gentleman behind me when I was inside this planetarium. There was a gentleman behind me that started talking to me, and his job on the other side was to know all about space and galaxies and star systems and planets. And he ran this planetarium. Well, he said to me, let's begin. And all of a sudden, all the lights went off, and I sat down in one of these chairs. And all of a sudden, he said to me, when you look at the stars, this is what you see. And what he was talking about was everybody on Earth at that time in 1987, with their level of knowledge and awareness, this is what they see when they look at the stars. And all of a sudden, he started showing me Earth, then our sun, and he showed every one of our planets, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, all of our planets in our solar system. Then they disappeared. Then he said, when we look at the stars, this is what we see. And what he was referring to was all the people on the other side, at their level of knowledge and development, this is what they see. And all of a sudden, planet after planet started showing up. First, there were dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, and millions of other planets. And he said to me, there is far more life in the universe than you can possibly know. And my guide told me that there were two reasons that he took me here. The first one was to tell me that life on Earth is not the only planet, that there are millions of other worlds that have life on them. And the second thing he told me was that Earth is not the only place you can come to for a lifetime, but it is the hardest one. So apparently there are millions and millions of other worlds that have life on them, that we can have lifetimes. And I want to tell your audience something that blew my mind completely when I learned about astronomy, because when I was a kid, I had always believed that there had to be life on other planets. You remember that show Star Trek with Captain Kirk?
Yep.
I wanted to be Captain Kirk because I always believed that there was life, there had to be life on other planets. So I came across this woman here who was an astronomer, and she was trying to explain to people how large the Milky Way galaxy really is, just our galaxy. And she said that if we had a spaceship that could travel at the speed of light, which is what we know is 186,000 miles a second, that's what we know is to be the fastest speed. It would take 99,000 years, almost 100,000 years, just to get from one end of our Milky Way to the other end of just our galaxy. And I was reading a NASA website not too long ago, and they said that so far, astronomers have been able to categorize 285,000 separate galaxies. And I just could not fathom how large a galaxy really is. And they believe that there are billions and billions of galaxies in the universe. So and our astronomer was telling us that they believe there are 100 billion planets just in the Milky Way alone. If you can imagine how many planets there are in the universe, you can't even calculate that. So I think that was one of my favorite parts of my near-death experience, was learning about other planets.
Yeah, I love learning about other planets. So it's amazing to hear that. You know how we have the option to possibly visit those planets if we choose to, from what you've said on the other side. So it's very encouraging, and I look forward to that.
I do too. I absolutely do too. I can't wait to learn about all that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of following the Mars, how they're trying to do whatever they're doing on Mars. Like they have a
they have a rover there right now.
Yeah, so I mean I really enjoy watching that stuff and learning about it. So excellent to hear that. So, but I mean, Howard Storm has also told me that on his time on the other side, that he experienced other life forms, other planets. Other people have told me that, so I mean, there's got to be truth to it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I was reading something recently from another astronomer, and they said that so far, as of the year 2023, science has discovered 5,340 planets outside of our solar system, and they call them exoplanets. It just simply means that it's a planet that orbits its own star, just like Earth. So if they've found 5,340 just since 2023, imagine how many are really out there. And remember Carl Sagan?
Yeah.
He said there are more planets in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth. Just can't even imagine. Think of all the possibilities of having other lifetimes. I just can't even comprehend how big that is.
Yeah, it seems like it's an endless adventure. But
Yeah.
did you get to see any of the other planets that you?
Yeah, I saw some were yellow, some were blue, just like Earth, some were green, some were brown. And people have asked me, was I able to see any kind of civilizations? And I was too high. It was like looking down at a planet from orbit. That's how far away I was. So I really couldn't see any kind of life forms or civilization. I just knew that there were more planets that have life than just Earth.
Well, that's really exciting to hear. So
Yeah.
awesome.
So I'll
Yeah.
keep going. I'm almost done. The
Okay.
the next building he took me to was the largest of all the buildings he showed me. And this one was a long building, but it didn't have columns on the side. It had the columns up in the front. And if you've ever seen, have you ever seen the United States Supreme Court building? You probably have. It's got that triangle roof and it's got the columns up front and it has a whole bunch of steps leading up to it. And that's what this building looked like. So we go inside, and inside it's a library, and I can see thousands of bookcases, maybe 20 or 30 feet high, with books as far down as you could see. And my guide said, everything you ever wanted to learn, you can come to this library. Remember how we talked about people still learn on the other side?
Mm-hmm.
There are all kinds of ways to learn, to still continue to grow. And this library was one of those places. So he took me off to the left-hand side. And on the left-hand side of this library, there were what we would call study rooms. And they were rooms that were about the size of an average person's living room. And he took me to this one room, and there was a woman in there. She had jet black hair that went down to her waist, and she was wearing kind of a purplish kind of a tunic or a gown. And she was watching what we would call today as a flat screen movie or a flat screen television that was mounted on the wall. And I thought that she was watching a movie or watching a TV show or a movie. But my guide said, go closer and see what she's watching. So I got closer, and what was happening on the screen was a battle. And it was a battle between Native American Indians versus the United States cavalry. And my first thought was, okay, she's watching a movie. But my guide said she's actually watching history. She was watching a battle that had taken place 200 years ago during the Plains tribes. And I thought to myself, how is that possible? We didn't have video cameras or even cameras back then. How could she be watching something that happened 200 years ago? And my guide said everything gets recorded. And that's something to this day, I still don't understand how that happens. But it has to be a God thing, because when I was in that life review, it was like watching a movie about myself, about my early life. And so everything that we do, everything that is involved with humanity, all of it gets recorded. All of our lives are recorded so that you can go back and see how you did. But I don't understand how that happens. But the significant thing about that was that I love history. You probably do too. I've always loved history. Well, on the other side, if you want to learn about some particular era of Earth's history, you can go to this library. Not only can you read about it, but you can actually go watch it. You could watch living history and how it actually really happened. And one of the things I want to do you remember much about 1944 D-Day, World War II?
I've heard about it. Yep.
Yeah, I have always been interested in that part of history. I want to know what those men went through on D-Day when they invaded the beaches of Normandy. Well, on the other side, I can go to the library, I can go to one of these study rooms, and I can watch live history about what happened during that time period. So
Wow.
anything that you want to learn about, you can go to this library, go to these rooms, and you can actually watch it happening. I thought that was
So
just absolutely extraordinary.
that's really cool. Do you get to experience it too, or are you just more like watching it like a movie?
That I don't know. All I saw was that she was watching it like watching a movie. She was watching a real battle that actually took place.
Wow, that's really
Yeah,
intriguing.
it's
Awesome.
crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I look forward to being able to do that for sure.
Yeah, me too. Well,
Absolutely.
I'm almost done.
Yep.
This next part is the last part of my NDE. My guide took me to a castle, and it was a castle just like you would see in England or in France. Beautiful castle made of stones, just like they were made back in medieval Europe. So he tells me we go on the inside of this castle, and the first thing I notice is this gorgeous red carpet that was all along the floor of this castle. And my guide said that if you didn't have a lifetime in medieval Europe, but you wanted to learn about that particular era of Earth's history, you could go look at this castle and you could see what people lived in during that time period. So we walk in, and when you walk in, it almost feels like you're part of the royalty. That's what it felt like inside this castle. And if you wanted to learn about what it was like during that time period, you could go to this castle and see what it looked like on the inside. Well, on both walls, on the left and the right of me, were these life-size paintings. And what they were of the people that had lived in that castle during that time period. So if you wanted to learn about King George or Queen Anne, for example, you could go to this place on the other side. You could see the castles, what they lived in, and you could actually look at and see what they looked like during that lifetime. Well, in front of each one of these paintings, there was a podium. And on top of the podium, there was a book. And what this book was, it was about that person's lifetime because they had lived public lives as royalty. So if you wanted to learn about, let's say, King George, you could go look at his picture, and then right in front of his picture was a book about his life, and you could read about his lifetime. Well, right about then, I looked over to my right, and there was a woman who was coming down this circular stairwell, and she had strawberry blonde hair about down to her shoulders, and she was wearing kind of a peach orange kind of gown. And she walked up to me and she said, "Is there anything I can help you find?" And Cory, I did the stupidest thing that I still can't believe I said this to her, but I said, "No thanks, I'm just looking." I could have asked her, I could have asked her anything. I could have said, "Where am I? What's going on? Who are you? I thought I was supposed to be having surgery. What's happening?" But I didn't know that I had died, so I didn't know to ask any questions. Well, my guide told me that her job on the other side is to be kind of like a professor or a teacher about that particular era of Earth's history. So if you're on the other side and you never had a lifetime in medieval Europe, but you wanted to learn about it, you could go see the castles, you could walk in and see what they looked like, you could read about their lives in these books, or you could ask this girl about that particular time of Earth's history. And she was like a professor of medieval Europe. You could ask her anything. And I thought that was so extraordinary that you can not only go to look at what people lived in, what their lives were like, but you could actually talk to somebody who knew everything about that particular era of Earth's history. And the very last thing in my NDE, which we already talked about, was the part about seeing Jesus. And that's how my experience ended. As soon as he said to me, "You must tell them there is no death." And the second he said that, I was right back in the operating room again. And I had lived my life trying to do exactly that, what he told me to do, to share my story. And for me, just me personally, it has given me so much hope and so much inspiration to know that there's really a reason for all of this. None of this is an accident. None of our lives are accidents. And that when we die, we don't really die. We just go back home again. And so I just want to thank you for inviting me on your show. And I hope that your listeners can get that same kind of hope that it's given me.
It's given me a lot of hope just speaking to you right now and reviewing some of your past appearances on different podcasts. So I really do appreciate the time. Like I say, I could ask you 1,000 questions, but maybe some other time. But I do appreciate you taking the time out. It's I know you're probably a busy man, so this is it's really appreciated.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Cory. I had a great time meeting you, and I always love sharing my story.
Absolutely. Is there?
Oh, if any of your audience has any questions for me, I want to give you my email. They're more than welcome to email me. And
okay,
it's John J. Davis 65 at iCloud.com.
iCloud.com. Okay. Yeah. Do you have any books or anything that you've written?
You know what? I actually don't. People have said I should write one, so I've been thinking about it, but I don't have anything.
No, well, okay, maybe you'll get one out someday, and then I'll be the first to buy it. But
okay,
awesome. So to the viewers, the email, that's how they would get a hold of you for any questions they may have.
Sure.
Okay, awesome. I do appreciate it, John. And you've opened my eyes a lot, and you got me thinking a little more than thinking outside of the box a little bit, which is kind of what I've been trying to do the last however long, a little while. So it's great to speak to somebody like yourself who has a different perspective on various subjects. So I do appreciate you sharing your NDE and being so willing to do so, because there's a lot of people that are kind of hesitant to do that. Maybe they don't understand why they've had one. I don't know. Yeah. But it's great that you're willing to do that. So I hope you keep doing that.
I'm going to try. Thank you, Cory.
Yeah. All right. Well, God bless you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.